Have you noticed how easy it is now to let AI think for you? You drop in a rough idea, hit enter, and a minute later you've got an email, a proposal, maybe even a strategy draft. It feels productive. It feels efficient. But there's a big question underneath all of this. As AI gets better and faster, is it quietly making you worse at creative and critical thinking? On today's episode of In the Queue, we'll dig into a risk that doesn't get talked about enough. The risk that, as we learn more and more on AI, our own creative and critical thinking muscles start to weaken. And more importantly, what we can do about it. Today in the queue, I'm joined by Dr. André Walton, a leading voice on creativity, burnout, and innovation. We're talking about how AI can either dull our thinking or dramatically sharpen it. Dr. André, welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you, Mike, and thanks for having me on this show.
You've been working, I'd say, at the intersection of creativity, burnout, and innovation for a long time. When did you first realize that AI might actually be weakening people's creative and critical thinking instead of enhancing it?
Well, a couple of years ago, really. I mean, up until that point, people were using AI, perhaps not even using that name for it,
Yeah.
as a way to do fairly trivial things in one's business, particularly. And it's really relatively recently, as we all know, I think that this has started to take AI has started to make inroads into much more serious areas, and in particular, decision making. So it's not we're not really simply making our everyday kind of filtering emails and that kind of stuff. We're now having people you know ask AI specific and deep questions, and the responses that are coming back have a meaningful impact on the way they're making their decisions about their businesses. And in principle, that I don't have any objection to that. I mean, there's no reason why one decision from one source should be any more valuable than a decision for the other source. The scary thing is that research is coming through with some figures about the extent to which people then start to ask questions about the answers that AI are giving them. In particular, a recent survey, you're talking about 1,400 people here. So, it's not huge, but it's also not trivial. I mean,
Sure.
it's what you might call statistically significant. Only 25% of those people questioned the kind of things that were coming back from AI. And then even fewer than that, we're talking about less than 20%, something like 17%, were actually making their own decisions based on their own information over and above the AI. So, what that really means is that when we get bogus stuff, which I call BS, from AI, if we don't question it, then the bottom line is that the AI sources are going to gradually be making more and more of the decision processes in the businesses in our world. And when you kind of trace it back to where AI gets its information, that is a little bit scary on two grounds. The first is that by treating AI in this way, we're actually reducing our own capacity to think creatively. We're not saying, okay, here's the problem. Here are all the parts of the problem. What are the many different ways that I can solve this problem? That's how we kind of, organically make a decision. And if we start shutting that down and saying, oh yeah, AI has given me a good looking decision here, this is what I'm going to do, then those neural pathways, which we can think of as sort of mental muscles, are going to get weakened. We're not using those mental muscles to start making decisions. And we all know that AI is by no means 100%. I mean, we get questionable responses back. But even that alone is not the thing that worries me. The thing that worries me is, well, just to kind of put it in a context, many years ago, when Big Blue, IBM was still in the sort of home computer market, they ran an ad that said, "No one ever got fired for choosing IBM." I mean, the idea being that, you're in a business and you're responsible for buying the computers in the company. The idea being that, you can't get fired if you choose IBM. It's
Sure.
like, it's the safe choice.
Right.
And the safe choice is a very dangerous thing to do. It's, if you look back to kind of 9/11 and the skies are suddenly quiet because there's no commercial flights and that kind of thing, most of the major airlines really chose to make a very much of a knee-jerk reaction. They started to use that disaster to renegotiate union contracts. They sloughed off the routes that weren't making them quite so much money, and they got rid of staff in all sectors, including pilots and so forth. And there's only one airline that didn't do that, and that was a large, significant airline. That was Southwest Airline. And they within sort of 10 days, they'd launched a profit sharing scheme for their employees, and they'd used it. They'd stepped back and said, is it really true that nobody's going to fly again? And of course, they knew that was rubbish. I mean, we don't know when it's going to bounce back. But that decision, that process, which really leapfrogged them above many other airlines in terms of their profitability and their size and their influence. And that decision alone was a creative one. I mean, they didn't choose the easy option. They didn't choose to buy IBM. They didn't do the knee-jerk thing, panic. And so that it's that sort of that's the difference between making a decision that's creative thinking informed and not. And so you can extrapolate that up, you can extrapolate that down, even small decisions. And a small business, a small entrepreneurial enterprise is going to have just as much need for that creative decision-making process as a big corporation. I mean, big corporations are notorious for, I mean, they say that, a camel is a horse designed by committee. And so you start to get to, big organizations, that I've worked with many big organizations, from the Virgin Group to the Smithsonian to NASA. And, you can kind of see this in play. When people don't entirely agree on something, then often that decision just simply won't be made. Well, do we need to make the decision? No, we don't. It saves the whole problem of people not agreeing. And I think, when you throw AI into the mix and you sort of start to see people saying, yeah, that's the decision we're going to make. And I put it into ChatGPT and out came this answer, and everybody says, oh, okay. It's a very scary concept because, we're not using that questioning analytical ability or the creative ability. AI is not creative. It tries to con us into the fact that it is, but the one thing it's not very good at doing is to make a decision based on many different domain-specific activities. And that's a very human thing. We think so much of our society is very vertical, and we tend to make decisions based on things in that vertical space. And creativity is not that at all. Creativity is boundless. We don't pay attention to those boundaries. We say, well, that's interesting. That works over there. And I know it's very different, but I wonder if something like that would work here. That's how we get real innovation. So it seems to me that this dependence on AI for decision making is actually really stripping away some of the innovation that we really need to keep. We are the most innovative country in the world, and it would be nice to keep that position.
Our guest is Dr. André Walton, speaker, best-selling author, burnout and innovation coach, and visiting professor of creativity and entrepreneurship. He's on a mission to help us use AI as a catalyst for innovation instead of as a crutch. Well, this is very interesting, Doctor, because currently the thought process may be in many companies, not all, that wow, we get this AI, we can get rid of the humans, right? So AI is always perfect, and we don't have to guess anymore, and we can save a lot of money at the same time. But what you're saying is we lose a lot if that's the road that a company is taking and just relying on AI at face value every time.
Yes, absolutely. To some extent, I think we're sort of thinking of AI as the digital equivalent of the steam engine. And, we no longer, need horses to go around a pump to pump water. We no longer need people to, wind cotton around a
Right.
loom. We've got steam engines to do that. And whether or not one agrees that that was a good idea at the time is neither here nor there. But it's that you can't apply that same sort of logical process to the art of decision making. That's where it really becomes dangerous.
So that's where employees should realize, because the attitude maybe AI is going to replace us, and so this idea that what humans bring to the table is still extremely important and necessary is key here to the future, because we hear these big numbers, hundreds of millions of people laid off because of AI. Now, is this something that you think is inevitable, or can humans hang on because of some of the concepts you're talking about?
I think any major change, from the Industrial Revolution to, the internet to various things, that you always have, these the Luddites who basically are they want to go around and smash the bridges and break the machines, and they will always be there, and in the same way as kind of shutting the coal mines. I mean, we have to move forward. That's an inevitability. I think the trick is that we have to focus on the things that we're good at. And creativity is the new currency. The old currencies were, if you put in your resume and you've got a good degree from a good university, you're going to get a good job. Well, that disappeared quite some time ago. And I always said if my PhD came with a $5 gift voucher, at least I could buy a cup of coffee at, you get the message. But
Almost. Yeah.
not
It's
true
going
now, but it
up
was
every
then.
day, right?
But the reality, I think, is that we are creative. We are the creative force. We are the innovative force. That comes from in here.
Yeah.
And it always will come from in here because there are AI can only work with the information it's fed. And creativity and innovation is ahead of that game. Otherwise, it wouldn't be innovative. We've got this kind of force moving forward, like a sort of sound barrier in front of an aircraft, and innovation is the thing that's in front of that, and that's the crucial thing, and so AI can't look at that part of the
Mm-hmm.
world. AI has to look at what's gone before, and that is inherently not innovative. Now, how you put it together in the form of AI may end up looking as if it's creative, but it's not. So we have to really focus on the creativity aspect of it. And I say to my clients who are using AI, when AI gives you a decision, I'm not asking you to ignore it. What I'm asking you to do is to think of three more options that you could take, as well as that one that's just being kicked out by chat.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes people say to themselves, okay, this is something that I've now got to think about. And because they've got the, if you like, the obvious decision thrown at them from ChatGPT, this forces people to look outside of that immediate obvious area, to make those connections that Chat GPT didn't make for them. And so, that's just the first step. There are many different ways that you can put creative thinking back in your life, but that is a very straightforward and obvious one. And it's crucial that people actually don't use AI as as a kind of I've got an incredible mentor here in the way of AI, so
A
I can now put my
replacement,
feet
right?
up or play more golf or whatever it is.
I think a
This
lot
is
of people are thinking that though. And you write about that. You
yeah.
write that our brains lean toward lazy, right? That's the way
Oh, you're
we're
absolutely
built.
right. Yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
about that. I mean, we are fighting not only the technology, but our how we've evolved in our brains and I guess the human nature is to take the easier road. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a neurological. I mean, this isn't one of my shower time theories. This is proved in neurology. What we do we don't do this when we're young kids because we don't have any history. But as adults, what our subconscious does is if it comes across a challenge,
Mhm.
it will scurry off back to its memory banks and say, have I ever seen or heard of anything like this before? And, obviously most of the decisions we make are not, have got some history that relates to that. And so we use that as a template. We use that as a script. We say, okay, well, that's the basis of what I'm going to do now. And it saves you a lot of time because, your brain can instantly say, okay, I've got a partially completed template here, and this is what we're using. What people don't always realize is it's also actually saving energy. If you think about stuff in an original way, your brain is actually using the same kind of calories as if you're going for a stroll. Now, you imagine you're doing that for 4 hours a day. It's not surprising you feel a bit tired by lunchtime. So the brain is really doing two things there. It's saving time and it's saving energy. So it is, I mean, it looks from the outside as if it's the brain being lazy. I mean, and I'm happy to use that word, but let's use efficient, because it's kind of word. And that is how we run. And you can imagine how that's changed since, let's say, I don't know, 100 years ago. I mean, we've developed such a complex society that the brain almost has to do that. We can't start from scratch with every decision because we have so many complex decisions to make. And they don't seem like that at the time. Now, because our brains already got in that habit of using that process. And the trouble with that process, of course, is that it also strips away the creativity because you're not starting from scratch and saying, I wonder what the options are here. I mean, if you just imagine, in the mail one day comes the annual renewal for your house insurance. Well, do you really sort of go through and say, what, I should check every other, and you check every other source of house insurance? No, you don't. I mean, it's just, yeah, this one seems to do the job. It seems to, you might ask a couple of buddies. It seems a bit high. Well, how much you pay? But that's it. We don't dig in and do, thorough analysis of the whole thing. And so, it's we just get used to this process of streamlining our decision making. But it does challenge our creativity. Once again, those neural pathways that relate to uniqueness. That's the thing
Yes.
about creativity. That we are demonstrating our uniqueness and our individuality. So that's the other branch of this whole process. This isn't just about the quality of our decision making. This is about also our core need to be seen to be individual. And all the time we're doing things via the template, we're actually not demonstrating our uniqueness. So that is another, perhaps more complicated field to get into, but it's another danger of having this cookie cutter kind of decision making process.
One key thing to learn from this week's segment is how do you turn AI into a training partner for your creativity instead of a replacement for it? Well, here are a few practical shifts you can try. One is think first, then prompt. Before you open your AI tool, give yourself a simple constraint. Take 5 minutes to write down your own ideas, questions, or structure. Only then bring AI in as a collaborator, not a starting point. Ask it, critique this, add to this, or show me what I missed instead of do this for me from scratch. Hey, if you want to learn more and you want help with this step by step, our new book, AI is Coming for Your Business: How Smart Owners Are Using AI to Cut Costs, Win Customers, and Outperform the Competition, is out and available for you right now on Amazon. So grab a copy and start boosting your business bigger and faster than ever before. We are in the queue with Dr. André Walton. Dr. Walton, one of your key topics is creative resilience. How do you define it, and what do we need to know about it?
Well, if you strip away creative thinking, you're left with deductive analytical thinking, and this is a little bit of a complex sort of visualization, but that's a very convergent way of thinking. We talk about drilling down, focusing in. And if you think about making decisions in the world that we live in now, so many of them require that. You've got a decision to make. Well, let's look a little deeper here, And so that becomes a habit, that convergence becomes a habit. And if you're coaching somebody, well, I'm sure you know people that have been, under a high degree of stress, anxiety, even burnout. And one of the characteristics is that they get trapped in the thinking about their own pain, their own stress, and their own position. I call it the hamster wheel effect. And what it does, and this is a sort of established social psychological phenomenon, when we're under stress, we tend to do what's called seizing and freezing. And if we want to make a decision, we'll seize the first option that comes to mind, and we'll freeze the act of looking for any others. So we're now making a decision we have to pick a choice of one thing out of one thing. We have no other options. We've frozen that process. So life tends to become like a racehorse with blinders on at that point. We are not, and you see this too with people who are very stressed. They can't see any positive options in their future, and that's because of this very divergent process that their thinking has come into. And so introducing creative thinking helps people step back. And by the way, the neurological pathways to do with convergent creative thinking are the same as when we're thinking with emotional intelligence. So it's got a number of positive aspects, but then it helps us step back, look a little more broadly at our world, and say, okay, well, it's not the disaster I thought it was, and we can get past it, and when we get past it, the future is bright. I've got all these options. So and now the combination of that, and you need both things. You need to be able to think analytically, but you add the creative thinking into that, and that's what resilience is about. It's about being able to look at a problem and say, this isn't a disaster. We can sort this out. I mean, the company is in a disastrous, has the appearance of being in a disastrous situation, but it's not a disaster. We just have to look at this and take sensible action without panicking. And that's resilience, and that's what happens when you add in this creative thinking process. And as I say, you're also increasing your emotional intelligence, and that kind of thinking process is really helping you have a big picture version of your world rather than narrowing in on this particular thing that's creating panic, anxiety, and that kind of very negative thinking process.
Dr. André Walton is our guest in the queue. Well, this sounds like AI or not. These are muscles we as workers, employees, employers, leaders need to exercise regardless of whether AI is breathing down our necks, because we can tend to get into habits, doctor. I don't you're the expert. So even if the technology is set aside, we could still get into habits which could limit our creative thinking at work.
Oh, absolutely. And in our home life. I
Mm,
mean,
personal life,
things
yeah.
like burnout don't have any boundaries. And so, you can your burnout doesn't have to start at work. I mean, it can start, and it often starts, to be fair, with a number of different things. So things might be going very wrong in your home life, perhaps with your spouse, or issues with your kids, or I mean, look, all sorts of different things. They will have an impact, of course, on what you're like at work. And in my business coaching practice, I will often introduce life coaching for the leaders in the company, because I don't believe it's possible to lead a company to its maximum potential when your personal life is falling apart. I mean, it's just
True.
so,
Of course. Yeah.
these things need to be addressed as one. So, but absolutely, I mean, this introducing these kind of ways of creative thinking is a very, very potent way of increasing your ability to step back, to be able to help other people, and the introduction of greater emotional intelligence. One of the sort of biggest impacts is that it makes it easier for you to create good relationships. So that's one of the many things that happens with higher emotional intelligence. But all the way around, you make better decisions. If you're thinking creatively, you will create more options in your decision making. That is inherently a good thing. I mean, sometimes we think, oh, I don't want more options. Can you possibly just give me one option? Well, I mean, you're looking at a menu of 50 different items, and it's like, God, they all look delicious. Have you got sort of a menu with one thing
Mm.
on it? But the reality is that, if you strip away any stress, you are going to make better decisions if you have more options.
So you work across academia, businesses, individuals, leaders, workers. Are you finding any common challenges as this AI technology transitions into the workplace or into schools?
Research is showing us that people are becoming less connected to each other. And that's a very scary concept, because being connected, is a core human drive, and without that, we can have negative psychological consequences. So, there are so many different things going on that it's very difficult to know, quite what is going on in terms of that you can specifically say is to do with AI. In the business world, I'm seeing, I mean, huge potential for AI. At the moment, in small businesses, I'm seeing a lot of confusion. I'm seeing people diving into AI, and sitting back and saying, "Wow, I've spent a lot of time trying to get this thing to do what I want it to do, and I'm not sure that it's going in the direction I want it to go in." So, I think it's got a long way to go before it really, and a long way to go in AI could mean next month, mind you, but is going to be a while before it really settles down so that the average smaller business can really make maximum use of it. I mean, it's one of those technologies where it's really tempting to sort of take your eye off the ball. In other words, your core business, and try in the hope that AI is going to solve various problems for you, and perhaps half that ends up being half baked, and so you end up having lost the time and got a bit disillusioned with AI. So, there is an element of that I'm seeing on quite a regular basis.
If you've caught the attention of a CEO or other business leader and they're interested in helping their teams, their staff, their employees improve their creative thinking as they transition some AI tools in, are there daily habits or weekly things that you'd suggest they do? One or two key things that they could begin with?
Create a slightly different mental attitude,
Hmm.
and saying, okay, I'm going to use AI to enhance my creativity, and use it as a brainstorming partner, and really, make a conscious effort to do that. So, rather than ask it a simple question that has a simple answer, go at it as if it's a brainstorming session and say, this is the problem we've got. This is it. I want you to look at I want you to come up with as many solutions to this as you can think of. And then having done that, which is the sort of equivalent of your brainstorming team, plastering the wall with post-it notes, each with a new idea on it. And then having done that, you say to AI, okay, well, these are the constraints we have here. This is the budget. These are the constraints in terms of what we believe our customers will tolerate. So now let's take this group of ideas down to a smaller number, and use AI as your brainstorming partner, because that way you're still engaged. Your creativity is still engaged in every aspect of that. You're not using it as a crutch. You're using it as a positive creativity partner.
How can people follow you?
If they go to my website, which I've got two websites actually. One is for people who want me to speak, and that's hire Dr. André, hiredrandre.com. My coaching website, which is plan, Plan, the number 4, and then change, CHANGE.org. Planforchange.org. And from that, you can hit a button and book a half-hour call with me. And I'm always happy to talk to people about burnout or innovation or anything to do with, those areas.
You bet. We will be sure to put those links in the show notes and post them on our website. We'll do a blog post. You've been so generous with your time. Amazing information. And we've just scratched the surface, I believe. I can tell.
I think that's true, Mike. Yeah. So thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dr. André Walton. So much to learn and so little time, but thank you for spending your time with us in the queue. This is Mike Schiano. Look for us at spscontact.com. Get the book, AI is Coming for Your Business. We also have AI is Coming for Your Job. If you're looking for ways to survive and thrive in the age of AI. We'll talk to you again in the next episode of In the Queue.